so I invite anyone who wants to grab a chair to take a seat. Welcome to this first ever TDSB Teachers Read event. I am Ms. Hall, the program coordinator at Library Resources, and I'll be your host today. In welcoming you, I would like to acknowledge that this building is situated in constitutional territories. The territories of the Wendat, Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and the Métis Nation. The treaty that was signed for this particular parcel of land is collectively referred to as the Toronto Purchase and applies to the land east of Brown's Line to Woodbine Avenue and north towards Newmarket. I also recognize the enduring presence of Indigenous peoples on this land. Today we are also live streaming this event, so in addition to our audience here, I'd like to welcome anyone who's watching online. Please feel free to share your thoughts throughout the event on Twitter using the hashtag TDSB Reads. I know Chris will be doing that. We're here to choose the one book that all TDSB teachers should be reading right now. We've got 5 amazing educators who will each be presenting what they think that book should be. And then it's going to be up to you, based on the panelists' presentations, to vote either in person today or online for the book that you think all TDSB educators should be reading. And the book with the most votes will be our winner. I'd like to introduce our panelists, starting with Rahim Essabhai. Rahim has taught in TDSB and around the world. He currently teaches senior business and co-op education courses at John Kalani Collegiate Institute, where he enjoys providing students with real-life experiences through social entrepreneurship and strong community partnerships. Rahim has traveled, taught, volunteered, and studied in over 25 countries. Welcome, Rahim. Next Chris is a dynamic K-12 coach at TDSB and humble, I should say. In his school, he has had a blast co-learning with and supporting schools in Learning Center 1 in areas of math, literacy, inquiry, and beyond. Beside Chris is Diana Maliszewski. Diana is a vibrant teacher librarian at Agnes McPhail Public School. She wears several hats, acting as editor-in-chief of the Teaching Librarian, which is the official magazine of the Ontario School Library Association. She is also an avid tweeter and blogger, and you can read all about her adventures in the school library on her blog, Monday Morning Musings. Beside Diana, we have Christina Saunders. Christina is a Cree educator who has provided leadership and direction from a uniquely Indigenous perspective for many years. She's currently an instructional leader with the Urban Indigenous Education Center. She's developed and led professional learning sessions to reduce the knowledge gap in residential schools, reconciliation, deconstructing Indigenous stereotypes, working with urban Indigenous students, and centering Indigenous content into the Ontario curriculum. Christina has a strong background in special education and literacy and currently sits on the Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario's First Nation, Métis, and Inuit Education Standing Committee. And finally, last but not least, is Jennifer Watt. Jennifer is the program coordinator for Teachers Learning and Leading, focused on supporting beginning teachers and their mentors and fostering teacher leadership. Her educational interests are inquiry learning, civics education, Indigenous education, and the role of creativity and empathy in learning. She one day hopes to eliminate report cards. Yes, please. And plays the bass guitar. There's a little gig afterwards. So, a big thank you to all of our panelists for being here with us today. And now let's get down to business. So here's how this is going to work. Each of our panelists will have 5 minutes to tell us why all TDSB educators should read their book. There'll be time to make sure that no one goes over the 5 minutes and include gentle reminders. Panelists will give you a 4-minute warning to help you conclude your remarks. And after everyone has presented, we will be opening it to the floor for questions. And there are a few seats up front. Folks want to come on in. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Rahim Essabhai, who will be introducing the Opposable Mind, Winning Through Integrated Thinking by Roger. Take it away.
Hi, good evening, everybody, and it's really first time ever. I hope it will be my last. I'd like to share a book called The Opposable Mind, which was created by Roger Martin. Roger Martin is the former dean at the Rockland School of Management at the University of Toronto, and came up with a theory called integrative thinking. He spent a number of years interviewing some highly influential individuals in our non-for-profit and for-profit world. And he basically asked them one question. When faced with two opposing tensions, two ways of solving a problem, how did these successful individuals come up with a third and alternative way of solving the solution that was far better than the first two options and was far more creative? And he coined this integrative thinking. And he beautifully articulates it here, the ability to face constructively the tension of opposing models, and instead of choosing one at the expense of the other, to generate a creative resolution of the tension in the form of a brand new model that contains elements of both. And I'm hoping as I share that quote, you're starting to see where and when we can apply this integrative thinking. Some highlights of the book truly stem from some concepts that revolve around mental modeling, systems thinking, and more importantly, causation, which is key words that have been all across the corporate world for the last decade, and there's tons of books on these, but he articulates it and beautifies it by using stories from our big organizations that we know, such as the Four Seasons, Dell, Pierce Handley with TIP, Victoria Hale with Institute for One World Health. And through each chapter, he articulates the story as to how each individual, each creative problem solver uses their form of integrative thinking through these different types of concepts. What I do in my class kind of stems from this, and I teach my grade 12 business leadership kids. I give them with experiences, projects, certain readings from the Harvard Business Review and all over the place, and I give them the tools, the concepts, and the methods of integrative thinking, where they actually apply them all and actually consult to real-life organizations. So in our class, we actually have consulted to places like Northern Harvest Food Bank, Pathways to Education, both for-profit and non-for-profit organizations. And last year, we consulted to Metrolinx and the Innovation Hub at University of Toronto, where my kids give tangible recommendations using the integrative thinking theory to these corporations. And they actually implement them into their corporations as well. The real thing that the opposable mind and integrative thinking gives to an individual is truly amazing, because it brings to light our biases, how we look at the world, our goggles that we all have, whether we have glasses or not. We have our own goggles. We have been programmed in a specific way through our experiences, through the matters in which the experience have impacted us as well, which have created fears, which have created ways in which we have diversity of thought. But not to mention in this diversity of thought, we shun away from certain things as well. And in today's world, where we have the most messiest, craziest, complicated issues and problems, the problem solvers usually come up with ways in which only impact a small privileged percentage. And integrative thinking brings to light all of our own internal stuff to give us the courage, to give us the push and the drive and the know-how on how to solve these issues. And that is what this book truly gives. The follow-up to this book from 2007 is now. It was just published a week ago, 2 weeks ago. It's called Creating Greater Choices. And the beauty of this is that Roger Martin and Jennifer Rial actually give the tangible ways, tools, and methods on how to use integrative thinking. The beauty of this is that my kids in my classroom are highlighted here. And my students actually ends the final chapter with this quote. And he states, "Before, I was one of those guys who, when I come up with one idea, one conclusion, I just stick with it. Now I write with pencil, very insightful. I expand and I erase and I do it over and over and over again, and my answers just keep on getting better and better throughout." This is what integrative thinking can do for my kids, and I know it has done for many individuals across our corporate, public, education, and all over our world. That's pretty good.
All right. Turning the podium over to Chris Lee, who is going to be presenting Intentional Talk, How to Structure Read Productive Mathematical Discussions by Elham, Kazemi, and Allison, Hintz.
Awesome. Okay. Oh, good afternoon. Yes, that's afternoon. So yes, thank you very much. That's the title of this book. And as I was reading through this, I like to start off with every time I read a book, I usually like to give it a rating. So I rate this book to be read with me anywhere you are, right? You've always got to read it with somebody else. But as I was reading this book, a lot of questions came to light because I wanted to present it in a way that you could walk away and say, okay, this book is for me, or maybe it's not for the right way. So I came up with a set of questions as I was reading it. So I found out the question that this book kind of answers is, why do we do math talk? How might I structure productive math discourse, especially during the consolidation? What are effective examples of math talk and prompts to support the discourse? What kinds of math norms and mindsets do I want to cultivate? How could this look like and sound like in the classroom? So practical kind of examples. And how might teachers and admin implement? So actually all these were kind of answered in some way or form. It's quite an easy read as well. I rate this as you can read this on the dock, or you can read this at home late night after you put your 2-3-year-old to sleep. So it's quite an easy one to do. So the first question, if you're going to go through this, so why math talk? And the book really highlights exactly the fact that if we want students to share their ideas, and students do so first, orally, verbally, before they start with writing and before they do the reading aspect, you want them to talk it out. So the need for them to do it in a structured way is so important. For us to not only model how to do it effectively, but also allow them to explore the ideas and concepts that they have brewing around in their brain as well. Through the talk, teachers can guide the students to form the connections from one concept to another. Because math isn't all about, here's a cool thing, here's a cool other fact. It's about making those really strong connections. And that's what this book really helps to do. Help the students with prompts to lead from one place to another as well. And by the way, there's a backside. So why math talk as well? Those are the 4 categories of the achievement chart, and it's really all in there as well. If we allow them to talk as well, it's not about communication, we allow them to also express the other categories as well. And it's right in our curriculum document in terms of the processing skills. How might I structure productive math discourse, especially during the consolidation? So when I talked about this, just a couple quick slides. This one here is our TDSB expected practice. So it really does highlight a lot of great practices, best practices and ideas on how comprehensive mathematics program should look like and sound like. And inside we have a 3-part math lesson, but one part in particular is this one. And this is the consolidation phase, in particular known as the highlights and summaries aspect. So this is where this book can help answer some of these questions. How do I productively structure this part of my lesson as well? And the authors go in to talk about, well, there's something called the open strategy sharing, but there's also these 5 targeted ones as well. They'll let you read through them. The idea, though, is that not to bore you to death with really cool and new terminology. The fact is that we actually do a lot of this. As I was reading through this, I actually felt very empowered. I felt that I was given a formal title to what I was doing back in the classroom. And that allowed me to tell my other colleagues, oh, have you done this strategy? And they're like, oh yeah, let's do that together. And so that's what this book really helps me as well to do. I gave for you as well, when you walked in, there's a handout, so even if you don't vote for my book, even if you don't vote for my book, you get a little handout today. One side, the front, it tells you if you will, 5+1 kinds of math talk and descriptions. And on the back side, something, I wanted you to walk away with something you can use in your classrooms tomorrow. So in the book as well, it's about talk moves. Now, it's not originally from this book, and the source is cited at the very bottom. But they use it all the time in this one as well. So on top of that, just really quickly, this whole book does cultivate all these ideas. It talks about the norms and the mindsets that we need to do as well. Bringing that to the forefront to help teachers understand, okay, that's what I need to do first before I even do any kinds of talk. So how might teachers and admin implement this? I'm thinking that not only individually, but as a book study, you can do it to determine where your PLCs are going to go into as well. And so that's why I think that this book should be read by all TDSB teachers.
So without further ado, we'll turn to our next panelist, Maliszewski, who is presenting Calm, Alert, and Learning by Dr. Stuart.
Okay, ready?
Okay.
Go. There you go. Good afternoon, everyone. So, as Ruth said, my name is Maliszewski, and I'm the teacher librarian at Kazemi Public School. And I'm honored to be, like with these people, panelists in the first ever TDSB Teachers Read event, so that we can stimulate professional learning discussions board-wide and possibly beyond. So I have just 5 minutes to convince you that the one book that you should choose to read this year is Calm, Alert, and Learning by Dr. Stuart Shanker. And I've chosen to use an Ignite talk format as the method for persuading you. This may seem to be the opposite of Calm because I have no control. The slides are going to go every 20 seconds. Bear with me. How well students do in school can be determined by how well they are able to self-regulate. And so what is self-regulation? It's optimal self-regulation. It's a state of calm focus and alertness appropriate to learning. That's the definition that Stuart Shanker uses in his book. So if you are in a hypoactive state, then you need to upregulate. That is, you need to become more alert in order to be in an optimal state for self-regulation and learning. So if you're super bored, super tired, you need more energy. You need to become more alert to be able to learn. Conversely, if you're in a hyperactive state, you need to down-regulate. That is, become more calm in order to be in an optimal state for self-regulation and learning. So if you're too excited, if you just came in from recess and something really crazy happened, you need to be able to calm down enough to be able to learn. The model for understanding self-regulation that Shanker uses has 5 domains: biological, emotional, cognitive, social, and prosocial. All of those contribute to self-regulation. And being aware of all 5 of these areas will help us. So why this book? First of all, self-regulation isn't just for little kids. It's for adolescent learners. It's for students with special needs. It's for students and teachers who want to be mentally healthy, which means it's actually for all of us. All of us in this room could use self-regulation. And reading this book helped me with my own self-regulation. Because if I became dysregulated in class, I had to think, what was causing my stress? What could I do to calm myself down so that my negative reaction did not cause my students to become dysregulated as well? And it helped. Now, I'm not going to lie, this isn't easy. And it isn't just for school either. This summer, I volunteered to take care of my friend's 11-month-old twins for a day. They cried for most of the day. I could have chalked this up to my rusty baby minding skills. After all, my youngest is 15. I could have said that, but instead, I actually considered what was provoking them. They weren't at home. They were away from their mommy. They didn't have their double stroller or their high chair or their baby bum video that they watched to help them nap. They had my mother, my mother-in-law, and me at my house, which didn't have any of these things. So they weren't bad babies, and I wasn't a bad babysitter. I did what I could to help them calm down, and even if it meant becoming a makeshift bed for an hour and a half. It really was an hour and a half. So I reframed the behavior so that it was a positive experience in the end. Don't take my word for it, though. I spoke to Aviva Dunsiger. Do people know her? She's a recipient of the Prime Minister's Award for Teaching Excellence and is on Twitter a lot. And she says, self-regulation works for everyone. Contemplating, asking yourself, why this child and why now, will change how you view children. And it shares scenarios in the book that ring true and uses self-regulation lens to help address issues. So, if you're feeling drained because your students look like they can't sit still, if you're feeling overwhelmed because you've got angry middle schoolers, if you have somebody who seems tuned off and tuned out by school, somebody on the autism spectrum disorder, all of this helps. The book provides practical suggestions that can be implemented quickly and shares connections to other programs that can support the development of self-regulation. So there are many options that work well with this book. So it's not just by itself. But don't get the wrong impression. Calm, Alert, and Learning isn't just a list of ideas. The book is based on current educational research, and it's often Canadian research with Canadian examples. So the book makes the research make sense, which is kind of refreshing. It makes you feel smart. Now, People for Education have a project called Measuring What Matters. And they say education has valued some skills over others. And one of the things that People wants us to examine is social-emotional skills. Stuart Shanker wrote the foundational report for People for Education. He's a leader in this field, and he's Canadian. Now, you know the TDSB mission is to enable all students to reach high levels of achievement and to acquire the knowledge, skills, and values that they need to become responsible members of a democratic society. It's going to be challenging, folks, if students cannot deal with stress. So therefore, we've heard some great examples. To be able to use integrated thinking, like Rahim promoted in his book, you need to be calm and alert. Productive mathematical discussions, like what Chris shared, you need to be calm and alert. You see where this is going, right? To be able to center Indigenous education in a curriculum, like in the book Christina is going to share, you need to be calm and alert. To be able to make social change in education, like in the book Jennifer is going to share, you need to be calm and alert. So all of these tasks need learners of all ages and stages to be calm and alert and ready to learn, which is why I recommend this as a must-read book for 2017-2018 school year. Thank you.
Thank you, Diana. We will next. Calmly, alertly, will help us learn about strength and struggle. Perspectives from First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples in Canada by Rachel A. I should have asked for
Mishenene.
Mishenene?
Yeah.
Mishenene. And Dr. Pamela Rose Toulouse. Yes.
So, bonjour everybody. I'm Christina. And why should you use this book? To help decolonize education. Why else should you use this book? To basically help with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's call to actions. And as educators, we should be responding to number 63, which states, have educators to develop and implement K-12 curriculum and learning resources on Aboriginal peoples and Canadian history and the history and legacy of residential schools. Now, I chose this book simply because it has perspectives from First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, and non-fiction texts and also fiction texts as well. Another reason why I chose this, and I'm pretty sure, if I get this quote right, but I heard I'm pretty sure it was John Moy who had said that if we provide teachers with appropriate support and resources, their engagement will increase so they may transform learning. And if we use evidence-based pedagogy, accelerated by digital tools and resources, then student engagement and student achievement will increase as well. So it's about putting text like this into the hands of the students who we are here to work with. Rachel, Mishenene, and Pamela Toulouse are the, I guess, the curators to this book. And they basically went and found different authors and curated and put different stories into this book here. So, let's see. Many of the visuals, going back to the collection of fiction and nonfiction selections, and then many of the visuals in the books are also photos and artworks are by First Nation artists. And there's also a short biography of each author and artist in here. So when you're sharing this with the students, then also get that aspect of the story as well. It's divided into two separate worldviews, like if you look at the table of contents. So the first one is in an Indigenous knowledge or point of view of using the medicine wheel in the four directions. And then the other perspective that the curators, I'm using the word curators, but they're using it as a alternative table of contents where each of the readings that if you want to talk about different issues of personal identity, traditional teachings, reaching goals, social justice, political struggle, and history. And then there's also, which is as an instructional leader, and when I go into schools, I get many questions about who are the First Nation people of Canada, or the First Nation Métis Inuit? What does Aboriginal mean? What does Indigenous mean? And so there's a very good explanation as to those peoples in this book. So I feel like this would be a very good book that if teachers didn't feel comfortable teaching the content, that this would help them in their journey. And basically also it's very good in terms of literacy. So the target audience for this selection is grades 7 to 12. And it's good learning not only for the teacher, but also for the students. And it has reading strategies such as analyzing text and illustrations, asking questions, activating prior knowledge. So all of those rich reading techniques, thank you, that the kids need to assess the curriculum. And I think that's it. And sorry. Also with this, there's a teaching guide. Right? So every teacher wants a teaching guide to support the text. And so I really hope that you take a look at this book and use it in your classrooms. English.
Thank you, Christina, for bringing and our closer on our panel today is
so great to be W.
Jennifer Walker, who is going to speak to you now on the text Releasing the Imagination, Essays on Education, the Arts, and Social Change by Maxine.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you to my colleagues because you've added to my reading list. It's so great to be part of something, two things that I really love a lot, which are teachers and books, reading books. So I'm here this afternoon to defend an educational icon, Maxine Greene, and her book of essays. It's a classic called Releasing the Imagination. So I'm here to convince you that Maxine's essays are essential reading for all educators. So Maxine was a brilliant mind, and she was an enthusiastic and really open teacher. She was an activist and a philosopher. She was an educator for most of her 96 years. I think she just passed away this year. She was immensely curious, and she was constantly questioning the world. And she loved the arts. Paintings, music, literature, those are the means she used to interrogate the world for the purpose of making it a better place. So I was introduced to Maxine Greene's work about 25 years ago, and it really transformed my thinking about what education should be, and it inspired me about what teaching could be. So Maxine Greene is actually considered quite a big deal in education. She ranks along with Paulo Freire and John Dewey and as foundational thinkers in education and schooling. You would have to Google her later to find out her long list of national and international awards. So she even has a school in New York City named after her, called the Maxine Greene High School for Imaginative Inquiry. So, in honor of Maxine Greene's book, Releasing the Imagination, I'm going to take you on a 4-minute imaginative tour of the Maxine Greene School for Imaginative Inquiry. And through that tour, I will use her words as a way to invite you to further explore her book. So, we are going to now walk up the walkway into the front doors of the Maxine Greene School for Imaginative Inquiry. And we see a beautiful mural. And on that mural, it states, within these doors, you will be asked to realize your deep connection to and responsibility for not only our own individual experience, but also for other human beings who share this world. Now we're going to continue down the hallway to the staff room of the Maxine Greene School for Imaginative Inquiry, and we hear our colleagues questioning the world and schooling. They are trying to figure out who they want to be as people in the world and as educators in the school system. They are questioning what is normal, what is habitual, and seeing things as they could be otherwise. The staff are interrogating, sometimes with hope and optimism, and sometimes with anger. Sorry, not calmness, Diana. For the purpose of making the world and the school a better place. The pedagogy of these teachers is one of alert engagement and activism. Teachers try to tell the truth. They try to stand out against violence and war and exploitation and oppression. They try to act in fairness, balance, and peace. And they try to enact the power of love that does justice. In this school, we begin our day with a call to social justice, although in this school we use Maxine's preferred term, which is social imagination. Social imagination is our shared responsibility to take care of each other and to use our imagination for good. In this school, we recognize that children are struggling to survive and make sense of a world that we and they know already is neither equitable nor fair. We use our classroom activities to stretch our social imaginations. Each classroom space strives to be humane and liberating community in which every learner is recognized and sustained in his or her struggle to learn how to learn, not what to learn. We notice students immersed in reading, writing, and creating. During the school day, we immerse ourselves in the arts and wonder about what is beautiful. Music, visual arts, poetry, literature, and drama are the focus and are given more teaching time and more resources than math or science. Students are expected to be able to express themselves in a number of different languages, including imagery, music, and dance. Art is not the underdog in this educational system. In the recycling bins, we notice lesson plans that are based on technical skills and standardized curriculum. In the garbage, we see remnants of bureaucratic, indifferent, and uncaring policies and procedures and standardized assessments. All right, I have to move on. I'm running out of time. So here we end the tour. And who would like to return for yet another more in-depth tour? Who heard a vision of education that resonated with them? If you did, then you need to read Maxine's book, Releasing the Imagination.
Thank you, Karen. Well done. And thank you to all the panelists. You certainly made our job of choosing one book a real challenge. I'm sure you really want to read them all, but you have to make a choice. So to help a little bit in that process, I would like to open the floor for final discussion. And I think what we'll do is we're going to run it from, we're going to start again after that picture. That's okay. And I'm going to invite you to start thinking about a question that you might have for each of the panelists. And you're going to let me know if there's any questions that have come into us. Is there a question from the floor for Rahim? So we have to integrate all of the thinking to come back to that. So Rahim, I'm going to start us off. Oh, I'm sorry, we have one.
I'm just, obviously, I can see the applicability of the book to grade 12 business teacher. How would you apply the book to a kindergarten?
Well, that's great that you asked that, actually. Integrative thinking is actually pushed across not only Ontario, but Canada, from K to 12. And you can ask one of our learning coaches here, and that integrative thinking is having a big piece, not only within a business class, but actually everything from the arts to science, to humanities, to French, and they're using it in so many different ways, even in mathematics as well. The tools of integrative thinking range from the ladder of inference, causations, even other specific tools where kids can use even something called the pro-pro chart. We're all familiar with the pro-con chart, but it was actually coined in my class, the pro-pro chart, about 5 years ago, where instead of looking at negatives to any piece of the pie, you're actually looking at just the positives when coming up with that other alternative. We have kids in grade 1 using the pro-pro chart. We have kids in grade 3 using the ladder of inference, which states on how certain individuals take a data and a pool of information and come up with specific conclusions. We have kids using that in science and math in grade like 2 and 3, which is pretty interesting and applicable all across. We're actually using this even across the world as well now, which is very special.
Were there examples in the book?
Yes, in this book now. So these are more of the methods and the models, and the new book is more about the tangible ways in which it can be used. Currently now, every year at Rockland, we do a more like a science fair, but it's like an icon fair, where kids across the province come in and share what they're learning, which is very special as well. So it's pretty cool to have my high school kids with their ties and nice dresses, and then I got a little 5-year-old kid talking about a cool bake sale that they did, where they used the ladder of inference for how they actually did a cool project measuring certain temperatures of water in the stream close to their school, which is very special, actually. Hope that answers your question.
Another question for Rahim? What I think we'll do is we'll go through and we'll give everybody at least one question, and then we'll open it up so that we can. So I'm going to turn to Chris. If there's a question for Chris, can you hold your book for Chris?
Do you remember?
Chris, I'm going to ask you one then.
I already answered all the questions.
Oh. They're small, and sometimes there can be a little anxiety around that, which you would of course smooth out. So your book's primary focus is math instruction, but how do you think it could help support educators in other disciplines?
Oh, that's a wonderful question. I think the first thing, how can it help in other disciplines? Well, the first thing is staring actually right at it. Right now, the hand up, if you get it on the way out, or whatever, you pick it up, right? The talk moves part of it is not necessarily just for mathematics. You're able to do all these moves. Take out the word math, and it really is just talk moves within the classroom. Discourse is such an important thing for students to add on, to read, to revise, to turn and talk, to agree and disagree, no matter what the content is. So regardless of the strand you're teaching, in fact, regardless of what grade you're teaching, imagine you have a grade 12 student able to agree, disagree with good justification because the teacher was able to provide prompts and norms so that every student in the room is able to understand that this person is not being defensive or aggressive. It's because we're doing this for purposes of learning. The principles of the book laid out in the first couple chapters are miraculous in the sense of we are setting the norms for a learning classroom and not a teaching classroom. And that's what I liked about this one as well. If you flip over to the other side of it as well, if you take all the different ideas, compare and connect. Why? Let's justify. What's best and why? Define and clarify. Troubleshoot and revise. Regardless, again, of the different strands. Yes, all the examples are mathematically focused, right? But to compare and connect, that's what kids in kindergarten do a lot of as well. That's what they do a lot to help provide their learning skills. Why was that students proud of their work as compared to something you're doing as well? We're talking about building up and supporting our students to be globally competent. It's not just about Strand itself. And the first couple chapters really laid that out. Norms is so important. It breaks through all of those specific and overall applications.
I feel like you've got a little pro.
But don't you that needs to read the book.
I'm going to turn, oh, I'm sorry, yes.
Next one.
Do you want to ask a question?
No,
All right, so we're going to turn.
Please tell me it's about changing diapers.
Convoluted learning.
So you mentioned, great topic and really relevant today, self-regulation. I have a strong interest in mindfulness, and does the book go into that because it's not just about learning, it's about managing yourself and being able to have a calm presence so that you can know that you have that calm within you, to be able to manage your relationships and obviously your learning, but so all of it. So does the book go into mindfulness?
So the short answer, yes. The longer answer is that they divide up the table of contents into those 5 domains, but then further chapters talk about self-regulation in special education and self-regulation in children's mental health. So there is an entire section that is devoted to mindfulness. They talk about yoga practices, and I did like too how they talked about teachers, because teachers get burned out, teachers that are stressed, and that if we as educators can have those self-regulation skills and techniques and reframe our own behavior, that we will be healthier, happier, not just educators or in school, in the learning environment, but in life as well. And also, Stuart Shanker is doing a Toronto Institute for Self-Regulation coming up in December. So it's a 2-day event here, so that there are other ways that you can read the book, but you can also attend his conferences or attend the Merit Center, which is the organization that he works with. They also have regular talks on Twitter. So, thank you. You're welcome.
So, question for Christina.
No,
I didn't.
So there's only.
I'm just wondering, you said it was for grades 7 to 12.
Yeah.
Do you think you could use it with younger students?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It can be differentiated. I think obviously for grade 7 and 8, it's a book that you can put in their hands, and if they have their reading skills at that level, they can read. But as a teacher, as a primary teacher at elementary, I've used it and going through texts in the sense of like guided reading form and just talking about the different issues that come out right in the terms of social justice, and basically helping to get that understanding to kids that here's a history of people that have been colonized, and they may not get those concepts, but it's a book that would help start to facilitate that conversation, and basically showing, as in elementary school, you want students to be resilient. Well, here's a selection of stories that you can read to them that show resiliency of the people as well. And showing positive role modeling and such, right? So diversity, culture, and in a lot of our elementary schools and high schools, it is a different cultural domain, multicultural, and equity, so yeah, it helps with all these.
Thank you very much. Jennifer, is there a question about releasing? I'm going to ask the elephant in the room, so to speak. I have a question. Your book was originally published about 20 years ago, and you said, that the author really is one of those key thinkers. But, what do you think, if you really had to encapsulate it in a sentence or two, or something short, what really is important, essential for and relevant for today's teachers?
For today, now, even though something is older, doesn't mean it doesn't have great things. That's a little personal connection I'm making. And I read a ton of professional books. I do teacher books on techniques on how to make everything more interesting, engaging for students, and thinking of different ways to try things out. So this book is a philosophical book. This book is for the big ideas. It pulls back from all of that and says, why are we doing this? For what purpose? And what could it look like? And focuses on that idea of imagination, which is not used so much in educational discourse anymore. So I would say reading the book is important because it provokes a lot of questions and critical awareness on the part of the teacher. As you read it, and Maxine will use music, and she'll use artwork, and she'll use literature, and say, come with me for a moment. I'm going to really mess you up a bit. Like, that's what she does. She's a she's a philosopher. She says, think about this, think about this. So it's not an easy read. I'm not going to say this is like one that you can read into in the morning. It's going to call out to you to think through it, and it's challenging, but I think it's important.
Each of our panelists has responded to a single question, but I'd now like to just open it up so that at random, if there's something that's occurring to you you'd like to ask any of them. Go ahead.
Jennifer, do you, after having read the book, imagine any radical change for us?
Well, I think I sort of did a little plug there earlier about radical change in assessment practices is a big deal for me, and I like to advocate for that. And teachers have more voice than they think. So they think, well, there's this bureaucracy and I can't do anything. But that's not true. We can change, and we will change, and we are changing. So I'd say that's one of the big pushes. But also, I do not like the way that curriculum is fragmented into different disciplines. I don't. And so to think through, what are these big ideas and ways of thinking that integrate thinking and really empower students, that's kind of what I guess I would change this idea. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to take a total shot at math and science. But if we look at funding and the discourse in education, we hear these, this is important, this is important, this is important. Meanwhile, this is not so important. And I think we need to trouble that up a bit.
Just more on that topic, like in the grades, there's such a strict timeline for teaching the curriculum, and teachers don't feel like they can be creative and be open-ended and use inquiry. They're like, well, I have to get this and I have to cover that strong. So you're absolutely right. Like, how do teachers, and I hear we're moving more toward inquiry, more play-based, et cetera, moving through the grades from what I hear. And how are they going to change all the curriculum to enable teachers to be able to, I know that's a totally different presentation, but
I like the way it's saying that.
I wonder if that's an integrated thinking.
It totally is. I've been very blessed to actually help create with integrated thinking my business leadership class. Like, we don't use the regular textbook that every the POH forum class uses. I just brought this in basically a year ago, but other than that, it's about the experiences, particular readings. We do code prepping tests. I actually get in a fight with the kid when they walk in on purpose. There's an actual script for it, and it's about understanding how and when we interact with our world. How do we actually unsee certain things as well? And that is the consistent, I would say, battle that we as individuals and that we as our youth and that we as any human being in this world has to contend with. And to me, it's not more about inquiry-based learning, it's about inquiry-based living. And I think that's what it really is about. And how do we, on any given day, we have about 20,000 things that are blasted to us, and we don't even know that it's blasted to us. And it's given to us in a particular way for a particular reason that makes us act a particular way.
But if we don't create that introspection and realize that we are being used in a particular fashion and employ techniques of inquiry-based learning or of just consistently questioning and consistently trying to figure out, digging and digging and digging and digging deeper as to what the true problem is at hand. I think that's what we're trying to do. Well, that's what I'm trying to do with young people. Sometimes when they come to me, I spend so much time undoing certain things, and that's why I have such vigor in what I'm trying to get to them. And there's such a massive shift within 4.5 to 5 months. I have kids visiting me that I graduated 4 or 5 years ago that still say that my class is the only class that actually got them ready for the real world. And I think that is my real wealth. Like, that's my wealth. We definitely don't get the wealth by our paychecks. I'm driving an old 400 Civic, so it's good to get together. But I think the whole piece of the inquiry-based living is what I'm trying to do to the kids, and that constant courage that there is an answer out there, but it's not going to come to you, because what's come to us over the last decades and years is what we use for the last decades and generations, which has gotten to us where we are today. And obviously where we are today is not where we want to be 50 years from now, or 20 years from now, or for my 2 lovely little kids that I have that are 2.5 years and 2.5 months. Like, I don't want that world that I see now to be what they have to deal with 20, 30, 40 years from now. So when it comes to the idea of competencies, integrated thinking hits them all on so many different levels, and it's up to us as the individual to figure out how deep we want to hit them. I hope that helps with the conversation.
You use that word competencies, and I don't know if any of the panelists might like to make a comment. In TDSB, we're talking about the vision for learning, and we're talking about global competencies, and all of you have addressed that in your talk today. Would any of you like to make a comment about how you see your work connecting to global competencies?
There's all these connections. Absolutely. There's like,
I'm
trying to think where to start with all these.
Collaboration.
I was going to say,
Communication.
Yes. Creativity.
It's definitely there. I guess with the big strong connection for this book, I suppose, is the big strong connection of this book, for example, is I'm thinking about my kid as well, just like yours, and how as he's starting to talk things through, he's 3 years old, so as he's starting to talk things through, the world around, the possibilities are starting to come together. As a mentor once told me, the person that's doing the talking is usually doing the person that's doing the learning. So when we were in university, we paid professors to learn more, right? The idea behind this is not about the teacher doing the talking. It's about giving the power to the students with prompts, with techniques, with the norms, so that they feel comfortable, so that they can communicate in an effective, meaningful way, so that they can start to make connections. And I feel that in our global competencies, 21st century learning, what the jobs that we haven't even thought about that our students, our kids, our young ones are going to grow up into, what we do know for sure is that those values, those learning skills, and those competencies, regardless of what career path, regardless of what you're going to get into, will stay with you and make you successful no matter what. That's my personal big thing about it as well. Beyond that as well, I'm a big proponent, I don't know if it's completely connected to the global competency, but I subscribe to the idea Maslow before Bloom. So have you heard of that sentence before? So you have the hierarchy of things of Bloom's taxonomy, but you also have Maslow's well know this. Yeah, interactive, yeah. And so what I found when I was reading this book, in my other notes, I started to make the triangle of as the person, as the community of learners are starting to communicate with one another, up goes their sense of belonging, up goes your sense of self-perception as well. And research has shown, I can't tell you exactly which body of research, but as it was told to me by our student achievement officer, that a person's self-perception is a greater indicator of their success, more so than their marks and achievement. So if you increase the ability for students to have a good self-perception, which, as we know, our perceptual data in our EQAO, like those personal surveys are showing, we have a very large decrease in our female population, 20+% lower than our males, for example, and yet they still do as well, if not better, in mathematics. But that gap will increase if we don't intervene and help them, guide them to their self-realization that they are worth it, that they are mathematically minded for another term.
Well, that's to be said with the Indigenous population as well, especially within our schools. I mean, like with they're coming with so many social inequities, and when you're using like texts that are about specific peoples, it's going to bring out that self-identity and make these students want to learn about their culture for one, especially in urban education in the city, and also for them to be successful and then to go on to high school and and be mindful and so yeah, I think when we're following these like competencies or these are all things that we need to think about.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Questions that the audience would like to pose? Or anybody tweeted in? I'm going to ask this question for any of you. After reading your book, what would a teacher's classroom look like? What might be a change? What would you expect to see? If in reading the book there's some tangible, visible representation of learning on behalf of the reader that's impacted the professional practice. Anyone want to take that one? Okay.
Well, I believe that, after reading this book, students, because I feel firmly believe that those perspectives of Indigenous people are not represented well within the school board or any education. It's starting to, and that's what my job is, to do, is to help, teachers to do that. And I feel by, including this book, the students are getting that shared history, or that history of, knowing that, there were a group of people that were here before, time more per se, colonization, and whether or not it's hard for teachers to want to teach those hard subjects of residential schools or 60s schools, but at the end of the day, it's starting with these small concepts. I would say small to negate away from the issue, but just talking about perhaps in the north and seeing a different perspective of how people live. And so I feel like the students will become, again, going back to self-advocacy, not only for themselves, but for a group of people that need that. So that's just one example.
It's funny that you asked about, what would you see as if you were to dive into the book and make the changes, because there's actually sections in there called application in the classroom. And one of those scenarios that we talked about was about a grade 1 teacher who'd been teaching for 10 years, but she had found that she was getting drained. That it seems like the students, she says as a hearer, the students seem to be changing. They're not as blank as they used to be. And one of the things they talked about was looking at the physical setup here for your classroom, because some students are overwhelmed by visual and auditory stimuli. So the book talked about, for instance, the Reggio Emilia. Did I say that right? Yeah. The Reggio Emilia approach, where less is more. So, taking down some of all the visual noise and clutter and just making it tiny here. And I tried that for myself, even in the library, is I took down some of the posters that I had up forever because I didn't think kids were looking at it anymore. And the kids and I know, hey, it looks, there's something different. They couldn't, yeah, that's right. No, they wouldn't say that. They said it was, like, is it bigger in here? Is it? But there was something, and it was a little bit more calming, yes, because, you know, the more muted colors and things like that. So there's a lot of things that you'll be able to see and to hear. And the nice thing, too, about the self-regulation is the self part, that your goal is that the students and the teachers are the ones that use the tools. So it's not, oh, don't forget to do your figure 8 breathing, your circle 8 breathing. It's the student who says, the circle 8 breathing is this really cool thing, and there you photograph your page, and you take your finger, and there's, once again, it talks about the physical relation between your physical and your mental. And so you take your finger, and you trace the figure 8, and as you do it, you breathe in and out, and in and out. And just, you know, calm right now. So being able for them, for people to be able to take it upon themselves to find the right tool in your toolbox to help you become calm if you're in a hyper-awareness, or alert if you're in a hyper-awareness.
I don't know about you guys, all this is a really thoughtful, both presentations or responses to the questions. We've got 5 great books that we need to make a choice about. So I'm going to talk to you about the voting process. And fortunately, our conversation doesn't have to end here. So you're going to have an opportunity to cast your ballot, to vote by October 31st. So in addition to getting your Halloween costume, you can cast your ballot. And for those who do, there's an opportunity to win a book. You don't have to read any of the books in order to vote. When I say that, I mean, you're choosing the book you intend to read.
I was still testing questions.
We're not going to leave that. You've heard some wonderful, thought-provoking and stimulating ideas tonight, so that's going to help you choose the one you're going to start with before you read the other 4. So if you're in the room with us tonight, you can vote in the voting station that's just outside the room, or you can vote online. And there's a bit.ly for the online voting. Coaching 2017. Please only vote for one book. We have recorded tonight's session, so you'll be able to view it later if you want to refresh yourself about what was said and be inspired and have your imagination, your perspective, your calm learning, your intentional talk, or you're integrating all of this together to be able to make a choice. And we'll announce the winning title by November 1st. At this point, I'd like to turn things over to Susan Ewing, who's the coordinator of the professional library, and to thank our fabulous professional library staff for their leadership in planning and coordinating this fantastic event.
My first 90 days at TDSB, and my job is to work with the people in the professional library and all of you to keep professional reading alive and well in TDSB, and there couldn't be a warmer event to make me aware of how this is such an exciting place to be. I'd really like to thank our moderator and champion of the event. Also back at the keyboard, live tweeting, Natalie who really was, this event was her brainchild, but she also did the exquisite graphic design, the rounding up of everybody, every little detail, the room setup, scrubbing the every edge, and so much things happen. Working with the custodial setup and everything, just congratulations. Also, our other two librarians here, when they're not doing tech support, are on hand to take your phone calls, your texts, your tweets. They will do research for you, find you books on your topic, help you navigate the literature, the infosphere. Judy Emmeline and Judy Chung. And just a few great ways to keep the conversation going with you. One way I would really recommend is if you sign up with our blog, if you go in and register on our blog, once or twice a week you get a really great email. But if you have a higher volume tolerance, you can follow us on Twitter, Pinterest for our new books. But the blog is a really nice way to get a pithy statement. But in terms of any other research needs, you know that we're here to serve you. This is my chance for the commercial plug. And also, just outside, the librarians have pulled together books on the themes that our presenters have discussed this evening, as well as each of the books that they've pitched is available for loan, but they've upped the demand so much you'll have to sign up on a wait list for that. But we really invite you to do that, and we have been going and looking for multiple copies, and I don't know, Jennifer, if anybody told you, well, we've got them online, and so they're older copies, and they have all highlighting marginalia. So,
I get this one round 3 by return?
You won't be able to renew it. And just so the party won't be over, we'll have a chance to talk a little bit more in depth about whatever the winning book is. We're going to be co-hosting a special TDSB Twitter chat on Thursday, January 25th. Thank you very much for that opportunity. And just one more plug for the TDSB and Twitter chat tomorrow night. Christina is going to be moderating a Twitter chat on Indigenous education. And so to join in either of those, it's hashtag TDSBEd on Twitter. Okay, so now we're coming to the conclusion of our first inaugural TDSB Teachers Read discussion. And you've already heard you're going to be able to view the recording of tonight's events, share it with your friends. There's a bit.ly TDSB Teachers Read. You have in other documents. There it is. And also we just have a few tokens of our deep appreciation for Rahim, Chris, Diana, Christina, and Shanker. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And I think it's like very appropriate. We hope we selected the previous CBC Canada Reads winner. Enjoy that. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
And now it's up to you. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being here online. Please vote and have a great.
Thank you.